8:17 a.m. Strait of Hormuz. Western exit, 7 nautical miles from the Iranian coastline. An Iranian Thondor-class missile boat just fired 2 anti-ship missiles simultaneously at USS The Sullivans. 2 missiles. From 7 nautical miles. From a vessel that had been tracking the destroyer for 47 minutes, disguised as a commercial craft in the morning shipping traffic. The USS The Sullivans, an Arleigh Burke-class guided missile destroyer named for the 5 Sullivan brothers who were lost together on USS Juno in 1942, was clearing the western exit of the Strait of Hormuz when her radar picture changed from routine to critical in under 4 seconds. 2 inbound tracks, fast sea skimming, bearing 047. And the crew had less than 2 minutes before the first missile reached Phalanx range. Welcome to Navy Powerline, where we break down the engagements that define American naval power. What you are about to hear is a reconstruction based on documented Thondor-class missile boat capabilities, Iranian anti-ship missile employment doctrine, and Fifth Fleet operational assessments of the missile boat threat in the Western Hormuz approach. The Thondor is Iran's most capable surface attack boat, a Chinese-built Hudong-class vessel that the IRGCN has modified and armed with C-802 Noor anti-ship cruise missiles, a 40mm cannon, and various rocket systems. It is fast, well-armed for its size, and specifically designed to operate in the narrow, traffic-dense approaches to the Strait of Hormuz, where its small size and commercial traffic cover make it difficult to identify and engage before it reaches firing range. The western exit of the Strait of Hormuz is not a clean, open-water corridor. It is a converging zone where the traffic separation scheme forces commercial vessels into defined lanes, creating dense clusters of radar contacts at predictable points. On any given morning, the approach corridor contains between 30 and 60 commercial vessels, tankers, container ships, gas carriers, bulk carriers, moving at varying speeds on various headings. The radar picture for a destroyer transiting this zone is managed chaos. Every contact has to be categorized. Most contacts are commercial. Some contacts are ambiguous. The track management system runs continuously, prioritizing contacts that show anomalous behavior. The Thondor had shown no anomalous behavior for 47 minutes. At 7:30 a.m. USS The Sullivan's radar had logged a new contact at bearing 028 degrees, range 12 nautical miles. Speed, 9 knots. Course, westbound, roughly parallel to the destroyer's own transit track. Contact profile, consistent with a medium-sized commercial ferry or coastal cargo vessel. Nothing about the contact warranted escalation beyond standard monitoring. For 31 minutes, the contact ran at 9 knots on a parallel bearing and did nothing. It logged a course adjustment at 7:58 a.m. that brought it slightly closer to the destroyer's track, but still on a broadly parallel bearing, still at 9 knots, still behaving like a commercial vessel navigating the western corridor. At 8:11 a.m., the contact accelerated to 26 knots and began a converging approach. The watch officer received the track management alert at 8:11:22 and elevated the contact immediately. At 26 knots, a vessel converging from 7 nautical miles closes the distance in approximately 16 minutes. The watch officer had that 16 minutes to determine what the contact was. He called General Quarters at 8:11:45. CIC manned fully at 08:13:19. The Tactical Action Officer, Lieutenant Commander Andrea Walsh, classified the contact as a probable IRGCN Thondor based on its speed and profile, and requested weapons authorization from the commanding officer, Commander Douglas Park. The contact was at 8.4 nautical miles, closing. Commander Park authorized warning shots at the point the contact reached 5,000 meters. At 8:16:52, the contact crossed 5,000 meters. The ship's Mk-38 chain gun traversed to bearing and fired a warning burst, 180 rounds across the contact's bow, approximately 300 meters ahead of its current position. The Thondor did not turn away. At 8:17, it fired. 2 C-802 Noor anti-ship cruise missiles launched from the Thondor's forward rails within 1 second of each other. The missiles dropped to sea-skimming altitude within 400 meters of the launch boat and began accelerating toward USS The Sullivans. The C-802 Noor travels at approximately 0.9 Mach, roughly 290 meters per second, at sea-skimming altitude. At 7 nautical miles, 2 C-802s have a flight time to the target of approximately 1 minute and 20 seconds. 80 seconds. the Aegis combat system aboard USS. The Sullivans had both contacts classified as hostile within 2 seconds of launch. The Tactical Action Officer authorized weapons free at 08-1708, 8 seconds from launch detection to weapons free, within normal parameters. The SM-2 engagement solution was building, but the geometry created an immediate complication. At 7 nautical miles, roughly 13 kilometers, the 2 Noor missiles were inside the optimal intercept range for an SM-2 Block 3B. The standard missile's ideal intercept band is between approximately 15 and 40 nautical miles. Inside that inner boundary, the SM-2's intercept solution requires the missile to execute a steeper initial climb and tighter intercept turn, which compresses the guidance correction time available to the seeker. Not impossible, just tighter. The first SM-2 launched at 8:17:11, targeting lead inbound missile. The second SM-2 launched at 8:17:14, targeting trail inbound missile. Both missiles performed their initial climb and turned onto their intercept vectors. The lead inbound Noor was at 5 nautical miles when the first SM-2 connected. Clean detonation. Proximity fuse triggered cleanly. The Noor's warhead did not achieve detonation. Debris scattered across the water. The trail inbound Noor. Here the engagement diverged from the textbook. The second Noor had detected the first SM-2 launch through its radar seeker during the final approach phase. Modern C-802 derivatives use an active radar seeker that can receive electronic emissions from the defending ship and from nearby missile launches. The seeker registered an anomaly and executed a pre-programmed evasive maneuver. A lateral jink of approximately 15 degrees, followed by a descent to approximately 8 meters altitude. 8 meters. That is below the optimal Phalanx engagement altitude. At 8 meters above sea state 2 waves, the Phalanx tracking radar encounters significant wave clutter interference in its target resolution. The second SM-2 had been guiding on the Noor's pre-jink track. The jink threw off the intercept geometry. The SM-2 detonated on proximity fuse at approximately 2 nautical miles, not because it had hit the Noor, but because its approach logic triggered self-destruct on a non-intercept geometry. The second Noor was still inbound. Range, approximately 2 nautical miles. Altitude, 8 meters. Speed, 0.9 Mach. Time to USS The Sullivans, approximately 22 seconds. The Phalanx CIWS had been in automatic mode throughout the engagement. Its acquisition radar was already tracking the second inbound Noor. When the SM-2 detonated at 2 nautical miles, the Phalanx immediately became the primary terminal defense. At 22 seconds to impact, the Phalanx is working at the edge of its engagement envelope. The cannon opened fire at 8:17:49, at a range of approximately 2,200 meters from the inbound Noor. At 8 meters altitude, the cannon's engagement was fighting against the same wave clutter problem that had degraded the SM-2's final guidance. The tracking radar was making continuous adjustments. The round stream was intermittent rather than sustained. The system was firing, adjusting, firing again. At 1,400 meters, a burst of 20mm rounds connected with the Noor's airframe. The propulsion section was damaged. The missile began oscillating, a yawing motion consistent with partial propulsion loss. It rose from 8 meters to approximately 25 meters as it lost the thrust, maintaining its sea-skim altitude. At 950 meters, the Noor's warhead armed. The missile was still oscillating at 25 meters altitude. At 710 meters, the Phalanx fired a sustained burst. The burst intersected the Noor's oscillating flight path during an upward phase of the oscillation. 720mm rounds entered the warhead section. The warhead detonated. The explosion at 710 meters from USS The Sullivans was violent. The fireball at 25 meters altitude was outside the typical Phalanx engagement geometry. Too far to be a Phalanx range detonation, close enough to be terrifying from the bridge. The blast wave reached the ship. The pressure pulse registered on the hull. 4 sailors on the bridge wing were knocked off their feet. The radar array nearest the bearing of the detonation experienced a momentary glitch. One radar element lost track correlation for approximately 11 seconds before the system automatically corrected. The warhead had detonated 710 meters away, and in the air, not on the hull. No one was seriously injured. No fires, no flooding, no structural damage that degraded combat capability. The Phalanx had stopped it. While the terminal engagement with the second Noor was ongoing, the Mk-38 chain gun on USS The Sullivans had continued to track and fire on the Thondor. The chain gun had resumed sustained fire at 8:17:17. The moment warning shots were superseded by the hostile missile launch, and had been firing in bursts at the Thondor throughout the SM-2 and Phalanx engagement. The Thondor's crew had attempted to turn away immediately after firing. Standard Iranian doctrine is fire and run, using the coastal proximity and the radar clutter of the commercial traffic to provide cover for the escape. At 8:17:33, a burst of 25mm rounds from the Mk-38 struck the Thondor's stern. The aft deck and engine compartment took hits. The boat lost speed significantly, from 26 knots to approximately 9 knots in under 30 seconds. At 8:17:51, while the Phalanx was engaged with the second Noor, the Thondor was at approximately 6,200 meters bearing 047, slower, damaged, and still on a track toward the Iranian coast. Commander Park had a decision to make in the next 90 seconds before the boat reached the 12 nautical mile line. Option A, continue Mk-38 fire from the destroyer and attempt to destroy the Thondor before it reached territorial waters. Option B, authorize an immediate A-18 strike from the aircraft on combat air patrol, using standoff weapons to engage the Thondor, even if it crossed into Iranian coastal waters, under the self-defense provision that permitted pursuit of a vessel that had conducted a missile attack. Option C, hold further action against the Thondor and focus on damage assessment and formation security, while requesting Fifth Fleet to authorize a strike on the Thondor's home base. Park chose option B. At 8:18:44, he transmitted to Fifth Fleet the strike request, including the vessel's current position and projected track. Comment which option you would have chosen below, A, B, or C. Fifth Fleet authorized the strike at 8:19:22. Two FA-18C Hornets from VFA-195, the Dam Busters, had been on combat air patrol 60 nautical miles southwest of the engagement position. They received the strike tasking at 08:19:31. Flight lead, call sign Spike 1, Lieutenant Marco Reyes, immediately turned northeast and pushed to military power. Loadout, 2 AGM-65 Maverick air-to-surface missiles and 2 AIM-9X Sidewinders. The AGM-65 Maverick is an electro-optical guided air-to-surface missile with a 300-pound warhead. At 60 nautical miles distance with full military power, Spike 1 would arrive over the target in approximately 8 to 10 minutes. By that time, the Thondor would likely be inside Iranian coastal waters, which it was. The Fifth Fleet authorization had included explicit language. Pursuit of a vessel that has conducted an unprovoked missile attack against a U.S. warship is authorized under self-defense provisions of the laws of armed conflict within the specific geographic context of this engagement. The Thondor's coastal waters position did not terminate the authorization. Spike 1 arrived over the target area at 08:28:17. His targeting system acquired the Thondor immediately. The damaged boat was moving at approximately 7 knots, trailing visible smoke from its damaged stern. It was 3.4 nautical miles inside Iranian coastal waters, paralleling the coast. The first Maverick launched at 8:28:44 from an altitude of 12,000 feet. The weapon tracked on the Thondor's hull. Impact at 8:29:01. The Maverick's warhead detonated against the Thondor's hull amidships. The boat broke apart. Spike 1's second Maverick was already locked. He fired at 08:29:04 against the larger of the two hull sections that remained on the surface. Second impact at 08:29:21. The Thondor sank at 8:29:48, approximately 3.4 nautical miles inside Iranian territorial waters. Post-strike assessment via targeting pod confirmed complete destruction of the vessel. The crew of the Thondor, typically 3 to 5 personnel for a combat mission configuration, was not observed abandoning the vessel. No survivors were recovered. The Iranian Coast Guard, monitoring the area from a patrol station approximately 8 nautical miles north, launched a vessel at 8:35 a.m. to investigate the smoke column. They did not find survivors. The Iranian Foreign Ministry statement issued that afternoon described the incident as an unprovoked attack on an Iranian naval patrol vessel conducting legitimate operations in Iranian territorial waters. The statement made no reference to the 2 anti-ship missiles the Thondor had fired at USS The Sullivans. No mention of the Aegis engagement. No mention of the Phalanx detonation at 710 meters. The official Iranian narrative presented a burning boat and no context. The U.S. State Department response cited the missile attack, presented radar and targeting pod footage evidence at a briefing, and noted that the engagement had taken place in international waters, and that the strike on the Thondor had been conducted under self-defense provisions following an unprovoked attack. The evidence was publicly available. The video of the second Noor's detonation at 710 meters, recorded by USS The Sullivans' deck camera, was distributed to the press within 48 hours. The 4 sailors knocked off their feet on the bridge wing were back on duty within 2 days. None had sustained injuries beyond bruising and 1 shoulder strain. The radar element that had glitched for 11 seconds during the blast wave was recalibrated during a Bahrain port call. The Mk-38 gun's barrel was inspected and found within normal wear parameters after the sustained engagement firing. USS The Sullivans returned to patrol in the Strait of Hormuz within 5 days. The central lesson of the engagement, the one that appeared in every after-action briefing and every surface warfare training update distributed in the aftermath, was the second Noor's evasive jink. The C-802 Noor is not a new weapon. It has been in the Iranian inventory since the 1990s, but the terminal evasive maneuver that the second missile executed, the seeker-triggered lateral jink followed by altitude decrease, had not been previously documented in U.S. Navy engagements in the Gulf. It had appeared in intelligence assessments as a possible modification. It had appeared in export documentation for Chinese origin C-802 variants as a claimed capability. This engagement confirmed it was fielded, not claimed, fielded, active, deployed against American warships. The Aegis threat library was updated within 24 hours to include the confirmed jink parameters for the Noor seeker profile. The update allowed future SM-2 engagement planning to account for the evasive maneuver, using a tighter terminal engagement geometry that would reduce the SM-2's exposure to the post-jink track change. Whether the Thondor crew that fired those 2 missiles had any idea that they were validating a piece of Iranian missile doctrine in their final moments is unknown. They will. The Thondor engagement produced one other finding that did not make it into the unclassified summary, but circulated widely in the classified after-action review. USS The Sullivans' radar track management system had logged the Thondor as a monitored contact for 47 minutes before it accelerated to its attack profile. For 47 minutes, the system had been watching a contact that was classified as probable commercial vessel and treating it accordingly, monitoring, not prioritizing. The classification had been correct based on available data. The Thondor had been mimicking commercial vessel behavior precisely. 9 knots. Broadly parallel course. No aggressive approach. No anomalous emissions. Nothing that crossed the automatic escalation threshold that would have pushed the contact to the tactical action officer's immediate attention. This is the fundamental tension in the Western Hormuz approach surveillance environment. Commercial vessels behave exactly the way a patient IRGCN missile boat commander would behave while waiting for the right moment to attack. Slow, parallel, unremarkable. Every minute of patient mimicry buys the attacker better position, closer range, and a more favorable firing geometry. The cost of responding to every contact that spends 47 minutes running parallel to a U.S. warship is operationally untenable. If every commercial vessel contact in the Strait of Hormuz required the same threat assessment as a probable IRGCN Thondor, the CIC watch crews would be overwhelmed within an hour, and real threats would be lost in the noise they generated. There is no surveillance resolution to this problem that the current generation of radar and track management technology can provide. The Thondor looks like a commercial vessel because the IRGCN studied what commercial vessels look like on American radar systems and trained their crews to match it. What the technology cannot resolve, doctrine must address. The revised doctrine, distributed within 60 days of the engagement, added a behavioral analysis requirement to the track management algorithm for the Western Hormuz corridor specifically. Contacts that maintained a sustained parallel track within 7 nautical miles of a U.S. warship for longer than 30 minutes would be automatically flagged for a mandatory active classification attempt, either via radar interrogation, radio contact on Channel 16, or Seahawk visual identification if the automated means were inconclusive. The 30-minute threshold was set deliberately below the Thondor's 47-minute window. A Thondor following the same behavioral profile under the new doctrine would have been escalated for active classification at 8 a.m., 17 minutes before it actually fired. Whether 17 minutes of additional classification time would have produced a different tactical outcome depends on what the classification produced. If the Seahawk visual pass had identified the contact as a Thondor at 8 a.m., Commander Park would have had the authority to issue warning shots at 5,000 meters and fire to destroy authorization at 3,500 meters, both of which would have been executed well before the boat reached missile launch range. The Thondor might never have gotten its shot off, or the crew, knowing that the classification was underway, might have accelerated their attack timeline, fired at longer range, accepted a worse engagement geometry, trusted that their missiles would perform. That is, the Western Hormuz approach today carries 30 to 60 commercial radar contacts at any given hour of daylight. The new 30-minute parallel track flag fires regularly. Most escalated contacts are commercial vessels. Some are IRGCN fast boats that are not on a mission. They are observing the new response protocol, documenting the new escalation threshold, and feeding that data back to the planning cells that will design the next operation. They are learning while being watched. The U.S. Navy is watching while they learn. That is the surveillance contest in the world's most congested and most dangerous maritime corridor. It does not pause. Stay vigilant, stay informed. See you in the next one.